This is the third film in a series about the creatures that inhabit our cacti and succulent collections. And in this video, I'm going to be looking at the chemicals that we might choose to use to help us control the pests that might turn up in our collections. Now, by their nature, chemicals may be dangerous. Now, that's whether they're labelled organic, natural, or synthetic. And it's a fact that over time, many chemicals that have been available to the horticultural industry and to growers such as ourselves have been banned. And that's because scientists have recognised that they may cause harm to the unintended target, perhaps killing the good guys that we saw in the first film, or harming our own health, our pets' health, perhaps harming wildlife, and also impacting on the wider environment, for example, polluting watercourses. I'm interested in chemicals because I've worked in the horticultural industry and I'm an environmentalist as well. And over my career, I've noticed the impact that some chemicals have on the wider environment. And I think that may explain why we don't see as much wildlife these days in the wider countryside and in our gardens. And I also think that chemicals can impact on human health as well. My own grandfather died of skin cancer, and he used to handle lots of chemicals when he was younger, and I'm sure that that shortened his life. So that's my own interest. So first of all, I would like to run through some ideas when it comes to selecting chemicals, thinking about how you could use them safely and if it's appropriate. And then I'll look at some different types of chemicals. As you'll discover, I'm not advocating their use. To me, they're a last resort. So I would use the environmentally friendly methods that I highlighted in the second video first. And then there might be certain circumstances that I'll come on to where I might choose to use particular chemicals, and they will be the safer ones, or ones I consider to be safer. So first off, do some research, identify what pest you've got that you're wanting to control, and if the environmentally friendly methods aren't working, then explore what options there are with regard to chemicals. The manufacturers are there to make money from their product. So some of the information in terms of the advertising is really going to be skewed towards what that product does and how to use it safely. Have a look elsewhere and take information from other people and other sources as well, and then you can make the best judgment possible. What I don't like about some of the chemical companies is some of the information that just seems to be lacking. So for example, if I was to choose to apply a particular chemical to a cactus, for example, I would want to know, is it going to work on that pest? But also, is it going to impact on other wildlife as well? So for example, if I had a cacti that was coming into flower and it might attract bees to it, are the bees, the pollinators, going to be hurt by the chemical that I've used? I would love it if that kind of information was printed very clearly on the labels. That would be a great help. In terms of the labelling, I would like to emphasise how dangerous these can be. For example, this is just washing up liquid that many of us use. There are obviously different brands available. This isn't one of the eco-friendly ones, but on it are labels, warning signs, and also words that describe it as being harmful. So if it gets into your eye, it's an irritant, and it also makes a point of saying that it's harmful to watercourses as well. And of course, this ends up going down our drains. Now, when it comes to chemicals that are pesticides, these are obviously designed to kill creatures, to kill the bad guys, of course. So by default, by accident, they could also kill the good guys, and that's at the least. So of course, they might do more harm than that. Now, if you look at the labels on the pesticides, I'm just using one example here. There are going to be words like this: keep away from children and pets, keep away from food, drink and animal feedstuffs. Do not contaminate water with a product or this container. Do not empty into drains. Keep off skin. Do not breathe spray. Wash hands. Now, if you're coming across words like that, it's just implying that the product you're looking at is genuinely dangerous if it's not used correctly. And you can put all sorts of things in place to ensure that children, pets, yourself, and wildlife are protected. And I'd like to just think about some of those things now. So when it comes to protecting your skin, wear chemical gloves. The fabric gloves that gardeners wear aren't going to work. Chemicals will go through them. It's very easy to get hold of these though online. Think about where you're going to treat your plant and in terms of who might come into contact with it afterwards. Normally I wouldn't use chemicals, and as I mentioned in the second video, if I have a plant that has a frequent pest problem and I don't seem to be able to control it, I probably will stop growing that plant. But if it was something really precious, then maybe I would consider the options. And in that instance, what I would do is I would take my plant and I would put it in a tray that I use exclusively for using chemicals. Put the plant in there, and then I put that in the corner of my garage where I have no food products and nobody else goes, and I would treat that plant. If I was using a spray, then I would use newspaper around that plant to catch any of the spray drift. And the idea of the tray, of course, is so that it catches any excess chemical, and then I can reuse that so nothing is wasted and it doesn't end up going into the soil or the drains and watercourses at all. So that's the how and the where. But the chemicals are often quite long lasting. So even the contact insecticides, which are typically a spray, you spray onto the plant and then it evaporates and think that's finished. Well, quite a few contact insecticides last a lot longer than that, potentially even weeks. And some chemicals may actually last for many months in terms of in the plant, in the soil. So a plant that I've treated, I would also put into quarantine, not just to keep the pest away from the other plants, but to keep it away from the things I care about, so other people, pets and wildlife. And in this instance, I would put it into one of our spare rooms on a windowsill, well out of the way. And hopefully it will do the trick and kill the pest that we're after. Now, in terms of chemicals, if you go into a shop, a DIY store, garden centre, you will find that you're confronted by an enormous wide range of choice, which can seem to be very confusing. That isn't helped by the language that the chemical companies use. They tend to go for all the scientific names when they talk about the ingredients that's in them, and I wish they could be a lot more open and use a language that we can all understand in terms of what the product is. And that goes to a point where there's a whole range of chemicals that perhaps even a single company sell. And I found that they tend to put the same products in very similar bottles, and they use almost identical names to describe the chemicals. The problem with that comes in that they are advertising a wide range of chemicals, some of which are possibly less harmful to the environment, and then others that are very harmful to the environment, that are known to be harmful. And that makes it very hard for us to make a choice. So my appeal to those chemical companies is to use clearer labelling, use language that we can all understand, and certainly make it really clear what the impact is on the wider environment and on wildlife, etc. You know, which are the ones that are potentially more dangerous, which are the ones that are less dangerous. And there is this spectrum, if you like, with all these chemicals as to those which we might consider to be safer and those that are perhaps more harmful. So one of the things that comes out of that is that if I'm not sure what's in that product and what harm it's going to do to children, other people, wildlife and the environment, I'm not going to buy it. You know, there's other options out there. Okay, what I'm going to do now is run through the different types of chemical that are available to us. There are the natural organic insecticides based on pyrethrin, so that's a plant product, and they come in the form of insecticidal soaps, plant oils and extracts. Now with these you would need to use them quite frequently to treat the pests that you've got, and you'd need to apply it all over to get to those nooks and crannies where the pests might live. There's also non-organic compounds, and collectively these are known as plant invigorators. This is one here, this is a concentrated one, but you can get ready mixed ones prepared as sprays as well. They were originally aimed at enhancing plant health, but it was discovered that by applying them, it may also control pests and diseases, and that's simply by coating them in an oily film. You can mix up your own pesticides, and that's what I've got the washing up liquid here. You would need to follow a recipe to use that and then apply it to your plant, typically to control things like whitefly. The advantage of buying chemicals can be that they've already been tested on the pests, and it's known that they will work, but they've also been tested on the different plant groups as well. And that's why sometimes on the chemicals you'll see labels that will say, do not apply this to roses. And the same could be said for cacti and succulents. If you're mixing your own, there's always going to be an uncertainty as to whether it will harm your plant. Another group is the synthetic contact and synthetic systemic insecticides, which is a bit of a mouthful. As I've mentioned, the contact insecticides may last longer than that instant of contact. The systemic can last an awful long time, and some can be 6 months or so. So again, they can have a much broader impact on other creatures for much longer. That includes one that you may have heard of in the press recently, the Neonicotinoids. Now these are ones that impact on pollinators such as bees and hoverflies, and unfortunately would kill them. Some of these have been banned, which in my mind is great. But if you go into a DIY or garden centre today, you will find that some of the products that are well known, that are widely available, also contain neonicotinoids. So I would avoid those. But once again, unfortunately, the labelling's not very clear. They're not using the word neonicotinoid, which in itself is a mouthful. And you've really got to do some research as to, what are the chemical scientific names that they're using for you to try and work out whether this is a product that you think is safe to use in your collection. I would say that with all the liquid sprays that you might choose to use, you're going to put that directly onto your plant. Be careful in terms of the timing that you do that. So if you were to apply it on a sunny day, you could end up with scorching. And if some of these are sort of more oil-based, that's even more likely. So if you were to use a spray, I would advise that you use it in the evenings when there's no risk of the sun scorching the plant. There is another group that I wanted to mention, and that's the slug baits for slug and snail control. Historically, these were from metaldehyde. Now, our British Health and Safety Executive had said that these pose an unacceptable risk to birds and mammals, and they're actually banned. That, bizarrely, has been overturned, and I've no doubt in time that will be overturned again. However, the companies that manufactured these looked at alternatives, and they came up with another option called organic ferric phosphate. And don't be fooled by the term organic. That just means it's a natural product. It can still be a deadly poison. So organic ferric phosphate was used. However, it seemed to be that maybe these aren't as effective at actually controlling the slugs and snails. So some companies then added what they call a chelating agent. And some research, again, this is just looking online, has actually suggested that the chelating agent with the ferric phosphate could actually be more poisonous than metaldehyde. So it might be that you see a slug control bait that's being sold that says organic, that says it doesn't harm wildlife. But if it contains a chelating agent, that might not be true. Once again, I do wish the labelling was crystal clear. So I'm looking in the shops and I'm looking at a slug bait. It doesn't say whether it's got a chelating agent in it or not. So therefore, I'm not going to buy it. I just can't afford to take that risk. I do wish that they would clearly label what's on and in those containers. So there's a real plea to these companies for clearer information. That would be an enormous help to us, I think. Go into my collection. I have a greenhouse. I have cacti and succulents growing outside. And in those areas, I have all manner of wildlife. I have frogs and toads, birds, small mammals, and I just can't afford to risk them being hurt by a slug bait that may or may not contain a chelating agent. So for now, I'm not using any of those, and this one's going back in the cupboard, or I'll try and find some way of disposing of it safely. So I've covered a range of different chemicals. It's not exhaustive. There are other types out there as well. And I will put a link to the Royal Horticultural Society, who seem to produce a regular update on the different types of chemicals that are available and their current status. And also it gives you the brand names of what's actually available, because as I mentioned earlier, it is confusing. Many of them have very similar names. And some will be on that spectrum of being potentially less harmful to the environment. And I think that's what this is all about. I think it's about trying to minimise our impact on the environment. We're always going to have an impact, but we've got amazing collections. We love growing cacti and succulents. And I think it's great if we can have healthy collections, minimise the use of chemicals, maximise the environmentally friendly methods, and particularly try and make use of the natural predators that we've got around and enjoy seeing them as well. And that's what brings great joy to my heart. It's not just seeing these wonderful cacti and succulents I've got, but it's also all these other creatures that are inhabiting the collection. And then it's those people that come and visit as well. It's a pet, Keith the cat, that some of you will have seen in and around my greenhouse. I don't want him harmed, and I've got so much wildlife around. So I think that by trying to do what we can to protect the environment, we can actually enjoy our collections even more.